Welcome to The Space for It with Makayla and Jacob. We are two therapists working to navigate making space for what comes up as part of the human experience. Today, we're kind of talking a little bit more about the therapist experience and the client experience. We'd love to know a little bit more there too. But we're talking about, should therapists tell their clients when they're having an off day? Like, how do we navigate that? So, Jacob, what do you think?
I have a lot of feelings about this because for a long period of time in the counseling profession, the general rule of thumb is that therapists were supposed to play like a blank slate. So we show up in the therapy office, we provide therapy for our clients, and they know nothing about us, minus what they can just tell from looking at us. And I don't think that makes sense. So we can all tell from that statement where I'm going to fall on this. But I don't think it makes sense to have a profession or to have a service that you're offering that works because of a relationship between two people. I don't think it makes sense to not have there be some back and forth there.
I agree. It's kind of it depends. Or it changes based on the context or to what severity we can kind of talk about that, but it definitely, like, I don't agree with like absolutely no self-disclosure or no back and forth. Like, it is a relationship and it isn't a friendship and it isn't I don't know, it is a professional relationship, but there's also this space of like, we are also human, and how we walk through that is modeling too for our clients. So for me, that holds me to a standard that keeps me intentional about my efforts and like how I walk through my own situations outside of the office, but also within the office. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity to model for our clients, like how we show up imperfectly.
I'm curious, and I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Has there ever been a time where you've shown up as the therapist and you've had something going on personally and you didn't share it and then that went badly, or you wished you had?
Not yet. When I think of this topic for me, most of the time when I have something going on personally, for whatever reason, my brain is like, yeah, we can just set that aside and like be present here, and it's almost helpful to be at work. A lot of times what shows up for me is a sense of, like, if I'm having an off day in the sense of not feeling my best, or maybe more imposter syndrome thoughts or more anxious thoughts are showing up for me, that's when, or I'm extra tired that day or something like that. That's when I have this dilemma or choice to share. Have you ever had that happen where you have something showing up for you and you haven't shared and wish you had?
I have definitely had sessions where, like, either I'm really tired because I have 4 kids, the oldest is 6. The last 6 years of my life have not been the most restful. And so there have been points where it's like, I don't feel like I'm even capable of functioning, almost. Like, I'm not going to show up, just in case anybody is concerned about the ethics of this, I'm not going to show up to counsel if I'm actually concerned that I won't be able to function. But I've had periods of time where it's like, I am so tired. I could fall asleep anywhere. And also I still do have to work, so I'm going to work. And there have been a few times where I've done sessions where I'm really tired and I can tell I'm really tired and I don't fall asleep. But afterwards, I have these moments where I'm like, I don't think I was attuned as it could have been. And I'm guessing the other person could tell. And anytime I think I come across in a way that the other person could tell, and it could be construed as like disinterest or not caring, those are the moments where I'm like, I should have said something about, like, one of my kids was up all night last night, so I didn't get a ton of sleep. I think that the funny part about this, though, is that as much as I will have those thoughts and feelings, very occasionally I will have a session like that, and I will go the next week thinking, like, I'm going to just check in and see how they felt about the last one. And I'll have them, like the person I'm meeting with, be like, last week there were some really great insights. Like, that was a great session. I'll be like, great. It's good. It's good.
I had a recent session with my own counselor that was similar to that, where they came back and were like, we just weren't quite on the same foot last time. And I was like, we weren't, but at the same time, I did take something valuable from it. And so it is interesting to see and feel that as a client and as a counselor every time I have come back so far to ask a client and check in like that. It has been like either I didn't notice or no, it seemed fine to me, or I got something from it. So It's kind of interesting.
I think that there have been, like, since I started practicing in 2016. Yeah, which feels like forever ago now. That's 9 years. Wow. But since then, I think there have been 2 seasons in my life where I've had things going on personally that weren't just being tired, but that were actually like emotionally draining and exhausting. Mm-hmm. And when I look back at those times, there were some clients that I shared those things with and some that I didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another big piece of this, is that every client is different, and what clients ask about you personally is different, and what feels like it will be beneficial to share and what won't. Mm-hmm. All of that is to say, kind of going back to what you said earlier, it depends. I don't think there's totally a black and white thing here. But I am curious, what do you think some of the things are that could be ethical concerns or could go wrong if you're experiencing something and you share it with a client? The
main one comes up for me is sharing in a way that isn't just informative of like, hey, this is, if you feel something different, it's might be because I'm going through some things. But if it becomes more about like the counselor than the client, because it's not our client's job to like care for us in that way, or like we have our own support systems that we lean on to do that. And so being able to share for the benefit of the client or for the benefit of the therapeutic relationship is where I see it being valuable. If it's outside of that, if it's not shared intentionally with that in mind or overshared, I think that's where ethically you could run into some things. Especially, I think about some of my clients who are caretakers or are people pleasers or things and really would want to support this other person in the room with them. And that is, I think, could be really harmful.
Yes. Like, I think that's a great point, because as the therapist, in every counseling theory, there we go, has a different understanding of like what it means to be the therapist in the room. And is there a hierarchy here? Is there like a significant power differential that we're acting on or not? And as much as the approaches that I use tend to have a very, like, they try and kind of debunk the idea of a hierarchy there. There's a word for this. I can't remember the word, but it's like me and my clients are on equal footing. We're on a level playing field. In as much as we think about it that way, there will always be some element of a power differential, because it's like, you are here coming to see me, and I have a lot of credentials and letters, and therefore there is some weight to that. Mm-hmm. And that's a big responsibility, because you're absolutely right that especially for somebody who maybe they're even in the counseling room because they're trying to get better at not taking on responsibilities that aren't theirs, maybe they would want to, or they would feel really good about being able to support you because you're supporting them.
I think I understand it. Yeah.
Okay.
In the sense of like, this is a pattern that for that person, maybe this is a pattern that is really comfortable or familiar. And so, and in a way they get maybe some rewards from that, a sense of self-worth or being needed. And if that's what they're there working on, then it could be confusing and messy to be doing that with your counselor.
Yes. Well, and I think that's where this all comes together, which is this idea that as the counselor, we have the responsibility, like we have a fiduciary responsibility, which means it's our job to work towards the best interest of our clients. We have a responsibility to make sure we're not imposing anything that's detracting from them or their experience or their well-being. Mm-hmm. That's a funny concept here because it's very subjective. Mm-hmm. Because on the one hand, when you are being transparent with the client, I've had sessions where I've shared things that I have later had clients be like, thank you so much for sharing that. It meant a lot to know that like you're a real person or you're experiencing things too. Like you're not just this person who has it all together. Mm-hmm. And then I've also shared things at times and been like, that was probably too much.
Yeah, it is really, there's not just one right answer. Mm-hmm. And depending on the client, it could be really valuable or it could be not so valuable to share. I guess I wonder, my curiosity that shows up there is like, how do we make that decision? What factors go into how you disclose those kinds of things?
When I think about it, I'm always thinking about the specific person. What our conversations usually look like? What are the questions that they usually ask? And then also and this last part is like the ideal world. I can't say I'm always perfect at this, but would me sharing play into actually making something they're working on harder? Mm-hmm. And like that would be an example of if they have a pattern of always taking responsibility for other people's feelings and that plays out in their life negatively, me sharing is probably not going to be helpful. Mm-hmm. But also, I do tend to be more of a relational type of therapist. And I work with a lot of clientele who are on the younger end of the spectrum, which I would argue that most people who are like in their teens and maybe even in their early 20s, or maybe later 20s, I don't know. But like most people in that demographic really value the exchange of a relationship, mm-hmm. where it is more of a back and forth. You're not just this blank slate of a person that I know nothing about, but you're actually a person who I see that you're human. And so in those relationships, I'm often more open to sharing. But the other thing is that if I am experiencing something that I'm like, oh man, I'm feeling this and I think it will impact how I show up in the space, mm-hmm. I'm still always trying to remind myself that the space, first and foremost, is for the client. Mm-hmm. And so when I show up and I have something on my mind, and this is something I either saw or read something like a year or two ago that thought about this, or that talked about this. Whenever I show up, I'm always trying to be aware of the fact that I don't know what you're bringing this week. Mm-hmm. And you could be bringing a week where absolutely nothing happened. Mm-hmm. And you could be bringing a week where everything was a disaster. And so my goal is generally to always start with you. Like, even if there is something I feel like I should say, I'm going to start with, tell me about you and like, what's going on? How are you doing? Did anything happen this week? One of my common questions is, anything noteworthy happened this week? Mm. And if a client, like, even if I show up with something that I feel like I should say, if a client out of the gate is like, actually, a terrible, tragic thing happened, I just like push it away because I'm like, okay, as in I don't push their thing away, I push my thing away because I'm like, I don't want to even risk taking this space. And I also do agree with you that diving into someone else's life is a pretty good distraction and really helps with compartmentalizing what's going on in my own.
Yeah. It can be the thing that helps you be present. Mm-hmm. In a way. And then it's like dealing with your thing outside of that so that you're actually processing, or that's what I found for myself. Like, I need to make space and not just work more or something. Mm-hmm. It's like I need to make space for me to process and deal with this outside. So that this is more sustainable, that I can come back and still dive into my clients' lives and help them. Mm-hmm. But be doing the work that I'm asking them to do, too.
One of the perspectives that you'll hear on social media is if you're a therapist and you post something about an emotional response you had in a session to a client, you will always get other therapists who comment very strongly, basically being like, you are not ready to be doing therapeutic work if you haven't dealt with this yourself. Because if you're totally ready to be working with this clientele on this issue, you should have already done all of that work yourself so that you can show up and be the space for them. And I would actually kind of argue against that, because that feels very blank slatey. And it's not that we should be in the session with somebody and be like, oh my goodness, I'm going through that too. Like, no, that's not valuable. Well, maybe it could be. I could probably argue that it could be in a very specific context. But in general, like, you don't have to have everything perfectly solved. And there is value in demonstrating that I'm human, because we never want our clients to look at us like up on some pedestal and be like, well, they're so perfect and all together. I'm never going to be there, so why would I even try?
Yeah. I think there's a beautiful thing to bringing a level of humanity to it, and and the situation that you just described of like being in it with our clients in that moment, or having the emotion show up, I feel like is more likely right now happening. And I've noticed with a handful of client sessions being like, I don't know what to do here either. Like, I am also experiencing, like with COVID, we're experiencing this as together in our own ways, but at the same time. And so I'm processing it as you are processing it. I'm processing it with you. It's all happening at the same time, for the most part. So it is interesting. And I think that can be valuable in a way too, to even model, again, holding that uncertainty. How can we sit together not knowing and maybe have faith in that we're supported, that we have these connections, that we're not alone, that there's a common humanity here. Maybe that can soften us to the other people around us, or I don't know. So I think there is space for that. And one of the things that comes to mind as you were talking about it is in my intake sessions, there's this metaphor that I believe comes from ACT. I'm pretty sure it does. But it's called the mountains metaphor. And I use it, and I think it's a beautiful thing to take myself off the pedestal, for myself and for them, my clients. But it's basically like, I think each person is climbing their own mountain. And from where I'm at on my mountain, I might be able to see something differently. I have a different perspective of yours. I can see maybe a path you could take, a tool you could use differently, something else you could try. But don't think that I'm on top of my mountain, like kicking back with a margarita watching you struggle, because I'm not. And so just kind of, I love that metaphor. And I use it to say, like, if something doesn't land, if we're not connecting in some way, like, please communicate that with me, and I'll try and notice too, so I can ask about it. But I'm not perfect, and I want us to be able to work together to best support you, and I need feedback too, on how that's going or where it's not working. So I think for me that helps to start the relationship off in a place where then throughout our sessions I can come back. And a lot of times how I approach it when people ask, because it's a common question of just like, oh, how's it going, when we're walking into the counseling office, and I'll just be like, kind of mixed, like, and instead of having to say good or, oh, I'm fine, or doing great, or not so great this week, or I don't know, I just like, I like to bring in the fact that like every experience to me is somewhat mixed. There's generally some set of maybe unpleasant or pleasant emotions, or some positive to it, maybe some negative to it. It's very yin and yang. And so I don't know how exactly my clients take that, but I think some of them at least really appreciate having a different answer, not having to just hide and say like, yeah, I'm fine or I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes even that just addresses like if I'm tired or something, I'll be like, yeah, kind of mixed. But I'm here. Happy to be here with you.
I think that acknowledgement of our shared humanity almost is so huge. Like I think it's really valuable to let clients know that, yeah, we are, like I like that metaphor where it's like we are both climbing mountains. They are different mountains, but we're both climbing. Mm-hmm. Neither of us have arrived at the end and have all of the answers. And I also like that idea of saying it's mixed, because you're not saying a lot, but you're giving them an opportunity to, if they really want to know, to ask, in which case then you get to make the decision of, do I answer? Mm-hmm. Or the chance to be like, okay, cool, I'm not going to say anything. My equivalent of that I will always say, if I'm like, if something's going on and a client asks me how I'm doing, I will say I'm here. Like, I'm here. And sometimes they're like, ooh, okay. All right. Do you want to share more? And sometimes people are just like, okay, cool. Like, we're there. We're good with it. Yeah. And I think that's also valuable because it gives I'm a big advocate for giving agency. Mm-hmm. And it gives someone agency to decide how they want to interact with it. Do they want to ask more, or do they just want to be like, okay, cool, so let me talk about what happened? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it feels better for me too when I show up and I'm able to allow myself that it can be mixed. And I'm not going to say it's good or bad, because it's not good or bad. Like it might feel really unpleasant or really something, but it's like I'm honoring that experience too. I'm allowing that to be there, and to not mean that what we are about to, the time we're about to spend together is tainted by it. It's like, it's part of it. We're just, yep, it's mixed, and so is this probably. Like, in some way, there's some mix in here. Mm-hmm. Might explore something unpleasant, and that might be really valuable to you. Mm-hmm. So, and even in my own unpleasant experiences or things that I struggle with outside of here, also might be unpleasant and might be really valuable to me. So I don't want to say like, I don't know, I don't want to invite the things, again, that I'm trying to teach my clients, using modeling, again, more the language that is that I'm not sure yet, or I can wait and see, or it is really unpleasant right now. I could say that and hold space for like, I don't know what will happen after that though. I'm curious, in this space right now, with the nation being where we're at, I do feel I have a little bit harder time holding space for who knows if it's good or bad. Because partially, I think there's a lot of fear showing up for myself and my clients, a lot of uncertainty. And I know those things aren't good or bad, yet at the same time, I can see it causing a lot of suffering. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not as sure how to hold it right now in this way, in this space.
See, that is where I have a thought about that, but also I'm sure that thought is informed by how I am just as a person. Mm-hmm. I'll start with the thought. The thought is that part of the beauty of therapy is that you don't have to experience what you're experiencing alone. Mm-hmm. There's somebody there with you, which makes a tremendous difference. Like, you put somebody in an MRI and you watch their brain and you like poke them with a needle. If they're alone in the room, they experience that differently than if they're in the room with somebody who like there's a caring relationship with. And in therapy, we're giving people the chance to not be alone in it, even if it's like, guess what? The world is going up in flames, literally. But at least we're together in the flames.
Yeah.
Like, I do think that there is value in that. And the part of me that probably influences this is that I've always liked change. And I need to throw a huge asterisk on that and say that I don't like a lot of the change that's happening right now, because I see the human cost to it all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that people are dying. It like a number that I saw recently was since abortion has become banned, the infant mortality rate is up 11%.
Wow.
It's like, well, that's sad.
Mm-hmm.
That is sad. That is a direct result of this decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are also a lot of stories that will never be heard of pain and suffering that are the results of a decision like that. And right now there are so many decisions like that are being made very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And without a lot of background knowledge, that are going to cost human life, both in the US and elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that and I'm like, and then I also have the piece of me that's like, I can't do anything about it. Like, I can talk about it, I can advocate for change, but at the end of the day, like, I am one person with no great influence outside of my own personal sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, like, I can't show up and be like, Elon, stop doing this. And he won't. And so, yeah, like, I think there's value in sitting in it together, even if we don't know what to do about it. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the point of all this.
Yeah. I mean, and again, as I like go talk with my own counselor to get support through this kind of stuff too, because it is hard to hold. And it is, like, as a counselor, holding the fear of an uncertainty with other people, but then also it's mine too. It's ours. Mm-hmm. Like, it's shared. And so I love the quote by Ram Dass that is, we're all just walking each other home. Mm. I'm walking with many people, like, as a counselor, but also just as a person with my family and my friends and things that way. Mm-hmm. But then I also need people to walk with me and, like, to have my hand held through some of these really hard times, to know I'm not alone or get different perspectives on it. Or even to know that other clinicians are struggling too. Like, that it's okay, that it's been a really tough couple weeks for us, probably across the globe, honestly. I think this is not just for us as Americans, but for many people, because we're such a global society and economy. Mm-hmm. But to just honor, like, yeah, this is a really weird time right now, and we're in it together. Like, most of us.
I think you have Americans, and then you have the people that we have historically supported and provided things for that they didn't otherwise have. And then you have a whole category of the world that has gotten out their popcorn and is watching and giggling and being like, look at how that's going.
Then I think you have a big portion of the world who's been through similar things. Ooh. Who is like, no, why didn't you learn from us? Like, why does this have to repeat? I know Germany's been standing in solidarity and has had gatherings and things and tears shed to see certain things, certain patterns show up again. And that breaks my heart. As a person who loves to learn and loves to learn from others and learn so we don't make the same mistakes, so we don't have to suffer in the same ways, it is really hard to see some historical patterns repeat. So how do we share that? Like, how do we, or do we? I guess, how do you, when you are having an off day, how do you help yourself stay present when your mind wanders? Or, yeah.
It depends on where the off day comes from for me. Mm-hmm. Like, days where I am just absolutely exhausted because my kids kept me up all night are very different than days. Today's actually a good example. Yesterday night, one of my kids, like anytime they get sick, the way that they handle it is they just shut down. They become very lethargic, and they'll spend like 12 to 24 hours laying down, and you'll be like, do you need anything? And they'll say, and you'll be like, can you tell me what you need? And they won't say anything still. And it's that produces so much anxiety for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, tell me what to do. Tell me how I can make this better. I want to help and I can't. Like, I feel that with my kids more than my clients, more than anyone else in the world, where I'm like, I desperately want to rescue you from whatever's going wrong, which is a whole different learning experience and growth opportunity. But when that's going on, like when I have one of my kids doing that, that's always like sitting in my brain, because I want them to be okay. I'm like, are they okay? And when I have that going on, I have to work harder to consciously remind myself I've done everything that I can. Like, there is nothing that I can do in this moment besides setting that here so that I can hold space over here for this other person. And that is one of the things that I will consciously kind of remind myself to do, is be like, I've done what I can. I'm here for this person right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's very different than when I'm really tired because I've been up all night. And in those situations, it's more a matter of just like working really hard to stay focused, and then also doing all of the other things that we do when we're really tired, where it's like I'm poking my finger with a pen or like pinching something or trying to stay present.
Yeah.
It's very hard sometimes.
Yeah. Can be. I notice sometimes by the end of the day, my eyes will have just like, they're tired. They don't necessarily, like, I'm not physically exhausted necessarily, or even mentally completely tired, but just the amount of focus, like for hours with my eyes, like really looking at everything and being really present, I notice like I am just almost not sore, but in a way just like, yeah, I just need a little massage, like a little bit of a rest. There's some tension there. But I feel like when I'm struggling a little, or my mind's wandering a lot, that's what it generally is for me, or has been so far, is like my mind will be wandering to an anxious thought I have, or something that I forgot to do outside of session, or something like that. And one of my favorite things that I do is putting my hand on my leg, or on my other hand, and in a loving, like compassionate way, just kind of, I'll even do it like this, just moving my thumb, of just being like, yep, I know that's really hard, like, and just do your best, like just be here now and come back as many times as you need to. But yeah, this is part of it too. Like, this is part of that human experience. And that sympathetic touch for me is one of my favorite ways to bring myself back, with that compassion, that it's not like self-critical at all. It's very understanding. And I think it just brings a softness to it that allows my brain to, instead of like continue on the anxious thought pattern, or like feel so urgent that I need to remember this, or it just kind of gives it a break, and being like, yeah, it's tough to keep everything in mind all the time, like, or it's tough to have all of these emotions or the sense of urgency and then just sit here, and that's okay. Like, let's just do your best, keep coming back to the present. Like, it's just as valuable in a way to return every time you stray, and like have that pattern in practice, as it is to be able to stay present the whole time, like on one single streak. So I like to honor and celebrate the return as much as the presence.
I hear in there that very self-compassionate approach that doesn't beat up or attack or criticize for being human.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's just because we're both neurodivergent, but I don't know that it's possible to focus forever. Like the mind, in my opinion, naturally wanders after a certain point, unless you've found something that's so deeply engaging that it doesn't.
And even then, it's like if you did that 3 to 4 to 5 days a week, it would wander at some point. Like you can't keep that up. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. And I think this is where I think maybe it doesn't. We'll find out. Maybe I'm just going to force it this direction. But I think this is where, like, one of the biggest reasons I want clients to know if I have something going on is because I never, ever, ever want my clients to assume that if I'm off, it's because of them. Like if I'm tired, it's because they're boring. If I'm like distant, it's because I'm not interested or I don't care. I don't want them to think that. I want them to know that if there's something different about how I'm being the normal, it's because of something that has to do with me and not something that has to do with them.
Which I hear that impersonal perspective we brought up a handful of times in other episodes, like where, again, our minds just have the tendency to take things personally. We see something different and we're like, I think it can help us sometimes have a sense of control or our minds trying to make meaning or understand our surroundings, because that feels a little more comfortable. And most of the time, what is showing up for us as a counselor maybe has nothing to do with the client. Sometimes it does. Sometimes we have clients where we get really confused and we're not really sure how to help, and that sense of confusion shows up and can be what takes us out of that presence, or that imposter syndrome with that confusion. But most of the time I feel like it doesn't have anything to do with that other person, or not completely. It might be resonating with something else that's showing up for us, but it's not personal.
I think the thing that people would maybe most construe as being personal is when there's transference. And where, like, I'm sitting here as a therapist and I'm listening to your story and you say something and there's this touch point where it's like, oh, your story, my story, and then your story goes this way and my brain just goes off to the right and is like, oh, I'm following my story now.
Yeah.
And I think those are some of the hardest moments to come back from, because of how quickly our brains can move off into an episodic memory of like, oh, I'm reliving the story and the experience because of what just came up.
Or even trying to take, like, how did I walk through that? How did I get through that? Because sometimes I notice my brain will do that, where it's like, I want to be able to help this person, and it feels like going back and exploring how I went through that, or what was helpful to me could be helpful. And a lot of times I'll bring my mind back and be like if that shows up, you can try it out or ask them questions to see if that could be helpful, but also just stay right here. Like, because I've found that is more helpful. It's much, everyone's a different person and has a unique life experience, that their brain is most likely going to go a different way through that.
It's very pretentious to assume that what worked for you will work for everybody else. Like all of the 19-year-old life coaches running around charging $500 an hour. I have feelings about that.
I haven't heard about that.
This is one of the pieces of research that I love bringing up. But there are these two researchers named Ronstadt and Scoville, which are just fun names that I'm probably not even saying correctly. But they've researched the progression of therapists across their careers. And at the beginning, I've even talked about this, I think, on the podcast before. At the beginning of the career, therapists always approach clients with this attitude of like, I have the answers. I know the path that you need to walk to succeed. And by the end, it's the total inverse of like, I'm here to provide a space, but you're the hero of your story. I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
And that I love that distinction of like, no, we're here for you. I need to stay in with you in your story and not bring the elements that I brought in and place them onto you. Mm-hmm. When I think about, honestly, this is kind of funny almost. When I think about some of the personal struggles that I'm most likely to share in therapy, most of them have to do with parenting. And most of the time, I'm sharing them with parents who I'm working with. And the reason I'm sharing them is pure validation. Like, you know how you feel like you're a mess and you haven't figured it out because your kid is doing this and you don't know what to do about it? Guess what? Me too. Because I don't understand. My kids will not, they won't do fill in the blank thing, or they will do fill in the blank thing. And it is really hard.
Yeah.
And I personally think there's a lot of value in that validation, because it's like, oh, good. We're not like the worst parents ever. It's just, this is normal or typical.
One of the things that that reminds me that I share is more about like what my brain does, like in having that part. So in ACT, we would call it diffusion. So instead of being fused with a thought or a part of you or something, we have some separation, we have some space. And so in saying with clients, a lot of times that common humanity or similar experiencing, I'll be like, my brain does that too. My brain does that where it tries to figure it out. And sometimes it gets really stuck and rigid in trying to figure it out, that I can't be present. And so that's a way that I've found that can be really helpful. I think relating with my clients of being like, we're all human. Like there's not a level of like, you get to perfect someday and compare yourself against that pedestal all the time. It's like, no, this is the process of continuing to show up and try and return when we stray and like accept what is. Like it's a practice and a process. And it's not all our fault. Like our brains do these things that they just do. And they've had good reasons for doing them. And they're trying to help us. And it's not always helpful. That doesn't mean that we are bad people or that we I don't know, are imperfect or aren't worthy or not good enough. It's just part of our humanity. So how can we, me too, walk through that in a way that is kind, compassionate, and valuable, that helps you move towards your values and the life you want to live. So that's another way that I like to share or disclose without disclosing specifics that might not be helpful. Yeah. Do you have any of those kind of phrasing ways or things like that connect you?
I don't think I have a go-to.
Yeah.
I think anything from like, oh yeah, me too, or I feel that, or ooh, yep, been there. Like anything like that. Those are all things that I have that I know I've said many times in sessions. And I mean, a lot of what I'm hearing through that is, again, that idea of like, we're in this together. Like, this is the space to be human. This is the space to be messy. This is the space for it. And we're going through it together. Yeah. And I think it brings a sense of like, this isn't your fault. So there doesn't need to be that shame or that criticism. And it is your responsibility now to like learn how, now that you have awareness of this, like how do we navigate that and work with our brain in a way that allows us to not continue the same patterns or hurt other people or things. So it's not our fault that we do these things or that we've had these experiences we've had, but it is our responsibility to do something with it. Explanation, not excuse. Thinking about everything that we've talked about so far today, a lot of what I'm hearing is both that not everything should be shared in detail. There's a lot of nuance to what should be shared, why it should be shared, why shouldn't it be shared. But that in general, there's a lot of value in being human, or at least that's how we both approach being therapists. Yeah. And I think with this, there's always going to be nuance. Because I can look back at my years of practice, and I can probably look at 5 sessions, as in I have about 5 sessions that come to mind when I'm like, I overshared. I know I overshared. That's on me. That's my bad. And at least once or twice I've apologized, because afterwards I was like, I went too far in answering the question. And as much as I would love to be perfect, I think there's also a lot of value in having those experiences occasionally, assuming they are not really harmful to the client, because they serve as reminders of like, that's right, this is why it's important to be conscious of what we're saying and how we're saying it as the therapist, and what we're bringing and what we're contributing. And one of the other things I always think about that I haven't talked about yet, that I just want to touch on very briefly, is the experience of like, if you have something really big that goes on in your life as a therapist and you don't share it when it happens, can you ever share it? Because a great example. So our first kid, when he was born, he was in the NICU. That was one of the 2 times in the last 9 years that like that impacted my work, because that was really hard. He was there for 3.5 weeks, and it was exhausting and emotionally painful and like all the things. And again, the rule of thumb that I talked about using earlier, that I have pretty much always used, where like if we show up to the session and you're bringing something and I can tell there's not space, I just don't share it. There were people who I was working with then who didn't even know I had a kid. Like they didn't know that a baby had been born. They were not aware of them being in the NICU, any of that. And at least one of those people, later it came up, like 6 months later. And they had a reaction of like, oh my goodness, like, you didn't tell me? And so I also hold that slightly, where it's like, when it's something that's really big, if I don't tell you, will I have to hide it? And would that be detrimental to the relationship? Because then you'd have those seeds of like, I thought you cared and you showed up genuinely and you didn't share this big thing. And so I'm also always like, I hold that and I look at things and I'm like, yeah, if there's something that's major that's gonna be there, like, you don't need to make a big deal about it. But I know that there are people who appreciate knowing that it exists, even if you don't get into it.
Yeah.
So I also think about that. It's very nuanced.
It is. It is really nuanced. And I think there's a beauty in that. Again, there are many right ways to do it. Plug for my sticker that I made for this podcast. Many right ways. But there are, because there are so many different contexts that we enter into with different people and their experiences, different relationships and things we have, that you can't really do it the same exact way in every context. It just wouldn't work. That wouldn't be flexible. That is one of the things that I love so much about Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist psychology, is that it brings that in as kind of a baseline to say, like, try this on. And I talked about this a little bit briefly in the last episode, of just like, this is why I often say at the end of something's like, I don't know, try it on. Like, or I'm not sure, see if it works for you. But it's that idea that, like, I don't know what's going to work for you, and I'm not going to assume that I do, but these are things that have worked for other people in the past, or have worked for me in the past. And I want you to take an experimental, like, approach to life, to say, yeah, I'm going to practice this in my life for a week or 2 weeks and see what happens. Is it helpful? Is it not? And in that, it's like, take what works and leave what doesn't. And I love that approach so much more than just like, this is what you need to do, or this is the way to do it, and if it doesn't work for you, then you're broken. It's like, no, we're all so different. How are we supposed to know what's going to work for each person? Or even what's going to work for ourselves? Like, can I give myself this space to try things and notice and actually pay attention and observe, like, how does that make me feel? Is that beneficial? Like, is this relationship helping me move towards the person I want to be or not? What does it feel like to wake up early and go to the gym? Like, does that feel better over a week or 2 weeks time than sleeping in? And I don't know. So to be able to try it and not just prescribe it, but then also walk away from it if it doesn't work, is something that I have found so valuable in my life, and highly recommend. Again, it can take that sense of shame out quite a bit, or guilt, and can bring in a sense of curiosity and play, which we talked about last time too, being really valuable for learning more quickly. So, yeah.
There is so much value in openness to experience, in openness to change, in openness to making a decision, and then realizing, you know what, that wasn't the right one. We're going to pivot.
Yeah.
That's such a valuable perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to be able to say like, oh, yep, tried that one, didn't work. Instead of just sticking with like, nope, I did this, and so now I am this person forever. Like, oh, that reminds me of the quote. I don't know if you've heard this one, and I don't know who said it, but it's like, it's better to admit you walked in the wrong room than to live there forever.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, I would much rather admit that I had walked into the wrong room and then walk out and go to a different room than just live there.
One of the books I read last year about complex trauma talked about this, but they talked about how when you've experienced a lot of trauma, often the impact that has is it creates a lot of rigidity in your life. And when you heal trauma, what it does is it injects flexibility into life. And that's such a interesting way of thinking about how we're impacted by things and what it does to our ability to be open, to change, to hear things and be flexible.
And I could totally see that a lot of the rigidity that we have is our brain trying to help us. Like trying to make something more efficient, trying to figure out a rule so that we don't have to think about it every single time, which again is kind of an efficiency thing, trying to save energy. A lot of the things it does, but also trying to keep us safe. It's like, this kept us safe here. Maybe it'll keep us safe here and here and here and here. And then we find out over time, most of the time, that it worked in that scenario. And maybe it's actually really detrimental in these other scenarios. So we need to be able to pivot. And thanks, brain, so much. Like, thank you. The means aren't great sometimes, but the intention is wonderful. You're trying to keep us safe. So thank you. And let's try something different. I talk to my brain like that all the time.
I think it's great to have that compassionate and conversational approach.
It's helped me. Again, because it honors like the intention. And then it also invites like, what else could we try to do the same function? Like, you still want to be kept safe for sure, or I still want you to help me in relationships, but how could we do it differently? And then I can give my brain a little more of a break when it doesn't work, because I'm like, yeah, but it's an experiment. And I think it's funny, and I'm just thinking of clients I've shared this with, who are like, I have never thought of my brain as a separate entity. And at the same time, which I totally understand that, and at the same time, it's like our heart, we think of as separate in a way. Like, it's part of us, but it's an organ. In the same way that it's an organ that beats, that helps us live, I think of my brain that way. It's like, it's an organ too. It thinks and reasons and helps us live. And there's a part of me that can observe my thoughts, that can observe the way my brain takes in sounds and sights and things like that. So it's not all of who, like, my thoughts are not who I am. So it's helpful to me to see it that way.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
It gives us more agency, like, to be able to interact and influence and not just be carried along. Yeah. That's great.
In bringing that all back around is to say, it depends. And it's about flexibility. Should clients or therapists tell their clients they're having an off day? Maybe. Maybe sometimes. And it's okay as a client to tell your counselor how that felt for you. Okay. Like, hey, that was odd. Or, I don't know. Like, felt weird last week. Or, I don't know, how would you say that as a client?
I will always advocate for telling clients that they can ask their therapist whatever they want. It's not the client's job to determine what's okay or appropriate to ask. It's the therapist's job to answer. And because of that, I will always say, like, if you're in a therapy session and you look at your therapist and you're like, wow, you look bored. or tired or something seems off, ask them about it. Like, hey, something feels different this week. Just want to check in. Like, is something different? Because it's, in my opinion, it's always better to ask and know than to not ask and be left wondering and questioning and then end up being like, it was my fault, and then turning that into a downward spiral of doom, of anxiety that will make it so you never go back.
Yeah.
Because that does happen.
It does.
And it happens very... This feels harsh almost, but I would argue that it happens unnecessarily.
And I will say, as a client of counselors, when a counselor has come back and said, hey, it felt kind of off last week, even if I didn't feel that, I don't know what this is like for other people, but for me, I was like, I really appreciate that they were aware. Or like even, and in the most recent one where it did feel a little off that last week, and I still got something from it, and it was valuable to me. It was really nice to be like, okay, like they felt it too, they saw it, and they were willing to address it, because sometimes that can be really hard, even to bring up. And I think it's really valuable. Again, it just is this symbolic gesture of, I care about this relationship. I want to know what that was like for you, and yeah, and want to move forward in a better way, or just on the same page. Again, the value is the relationship. So yeah.
So much of this revolves around valuing the relationship, wanting to protect, wanting to care for, wanting to, as therapists, wanting to do our responsibility and not overstep. And as we end, a few things that we haven't said yet that I don't know how we didn't say. If you're in a therapy session and the therapist spends more than like 5 minutes max talking about themselves, that could be a problem. Like, in all of this, as we're talking about sharing if something is going on, by no means are we saying that should become the theme of the session.
No.
Therapy is about the client. It should never, the therapist should never replace the client in being the subject of the session.
Yeah.
So if you're in therapy, like, I've read a lot of horror stories about people in therapy having their therapists basically just spend most of the time talking about them. That's not how this is supposed to be, and that is not what we're talking about. We're just talking about allowing some of your humanity into the space and letting the people you work with know that you are human, you have things going on, you're a real person, and those things can impact you. And that can show up in the therapeutic space. Probably could have done the whole podcast in that 3 sentences.
But you got the extended version, because you love to hear us talk just as much as we do. Love to talk.
So, if you have ever had any really positive or maybe perhaps really negative experiences with a therapist talking about themselves in therapy, feel free to drop those in the comment section. We would love to hear from you.
Yes.
But otherwise, Makayla, do you have anything else you want to add before we're done?
I was going to add briefly, but only if you see this like little shower cap on this thing and you're wondering why, I'm propagating succulents. So just noticed that in my picture. Yeah. If you have any questions or experiences, we'd love to hear about it. Thanks always for listening.
About how to propagate succulents.
I could bring that to the podcast. We have the space for that too. Yeah, but thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Have a lovely whatever time of day it is, wherever you are.
Yes.